Hi everybody, let me introduce myself. I am Nermin. I am the teaching assistant at the Department of Epizotology, Microbiology and Parasitology at the Faculty of Veterinary Medicine. I am going to present to you my further lecture. Our today's lecture is Virus Survival in the External Environment and Viral Immunity. I'd like to start from this huge question, what is the virus? Virus is the microorganism, but what is the microorganism? Microorganisms are extremely small organisms. That's why it's impossible to observe them by the naked eye. In order to observe microorganisms, we need microscopes. Microscopes are divided into some main groups, light microscopes, electron microscopes, and etc. And again, what is the virus? As I mentioned before, a virus is the microscopic organism. That's why it's impossible to observe them. In addition to it, virus is the etiological agent of the lots of infectious diseases. When I say microorganism, I mean bacteria, virus, rickettsia, prine, actinomyces, microscopic fungi, and etc. Such kind of microorganisms are considered the etiological agent of some infectious diseases. On this stage of my speech, I'd like to say a few words about the diseases. Diseases are divided into two main groups, infectious diseases and non-infectious diseases. There are lots of differences between infectious diseases and non-infectious diseases. For example, infectious diseases has their own etiological agent. For example, bacteria cause the bacterial infectious diseases. Virus cause viral infectious diseases. So everything depends on the etiological agent. So another important issue, infectious diseases has their some incubation period. Infectious diseases has some clinical signs or symptoms. This is the main differences between infectious diseases and non-infectious diseases. There are the majority of viral infectious diseases around the world, like coronavirus, rabies, smallpox, HIV, avian influenza, and etc. Such kind of infectious diseases are considered the viral infectious diseases because virus cause such kind of infectious diseases. And another important issue, we need to grow viruses at the lab condition, the living organisms. But how and why? Because virus is the obligate parasite. That's why it's impossible to grow virus on gross medium at the lab condition, like bacteria. And this is the main differences between bacteria and the virus. We need living cells of the organisms to grow virus at the lab condition. When I say living cells of the organisms, I mean lab animals, including small ruminant, mice, rabbit, and etc. Such kind of animals are considered lab animals because they are very sensitive to some infectious diseases, for example, certain viral infectious diseases. And cell culture, and next one, fertile egg. In addition to it, it's very easy to obtain such kind of living cells of the organism to the virus at the lab condition. And next one, this study of virus is called virology. Virology is a huge field, and virology learns the treatment of viral infectious diseases, the vaccination against viral infectious diseases, and virology is the science about virus. And next one, virus infects host cells to reproduce. Of course, a virus needs some host cell organism to penetrate such kind of living cell organisms. And this living cell organism can be the animal body, the human body, and plant body. And another important issue, a virus can learn to adapt to immune response. Of course, when some microorganisms penetrated through our body try to prepare some immune response against some pathogens. The etiological agent, the pathogen, the agent are the same words because the meaning them are the same. And last one, viruses are much more difficult to treat than bacteria. Yes, sometimes it's impossible to treat viral infectious diseases, and it is more difficult to treat viral infectious diseases in comparison with bacterial infectious diseases. And our next slide, the anatomy of the virus. Viruses have their own both internal structure and the external structure. And viral structure is the different in comparison with bacterial structure. For example, bacteria have Golgi complex, mitochondria, cytoplasma, and etc. But viruses don't have such kind of structural elements. There are lots of differences between their structural element. For example, this is the anatomy of avian influenza virus. For example, nucleoprotein, RNA, lipid involved, capsid, hemaglutinin, neuraminidase. All of them are very important structural elements of the viral structure. And next one, I consider that these two illustrations are not unusual for our students because we are used such kind of illustrations on our school books, and I consider that these illustrations remind our students of their school years. And this is the viral structure, and this is the main elements of the viral structure. For example, the head, capsid, DNA, core. By the help of the core, virus try to penetrate some host cell organism and capsid RNA and capsid proteins. And the main function of the protein is to protect the genome. And you know, protein is the main source of the energy on any organism. And I'd like to say a few words about the nucleic acid on this stage of my speech because I consider that this is a very important issue. That's why I'd like to emphasize this important point. But what is the nucleic acid and what is the main function of the nucleic acid? I'd like to say that nucleic acids are divided into two main groups, RNA and DNA. I consider that our students have some information about the nucleic acid from their school years. And there is some differences between viral nucleic acid and bacterial viral acid. But how? For example, bacterial structure have both DNA and RNA, unlike virus, because viral structure have either RNA or DNA. This is the main differences between them. And I'd like to say that it's impossible to imagine the viral structure. In addition to it, the replication of viral structure, viral replication without nucleic acid. Why? Because the main function of the nucleic acid to program the synthetic machinery of host cell organism for the viral replication. I'd like to emphasize this important point. So I can say that it is impossible to imagine without nucleic acid the viral replication. And you know, if viral replication can't, the infectious diseases, especially viral infectious diseases, it's impossible to observe them. And nucleic acid at the same time, there are lots of another functions. For example, the main function of DNA to carry genetic information. The main function of the DNA to transmit genetic information to this generation from the another generation. That's why this is a very important point, because you know there are viral infectious diseases around the world, and so nucleic acid play an important role on the viral infectious diseases. And the capsid, this is the another structural element of the viral structure, and the capsomer. I can say that it is impossible to imagine any of them without any of them of the viral structure. And next one, this is the another illustration of the virus structure. And I can see that the virus structure sometimes a little bit unusual for our students in the bacterial structure. But I consider that this is not the difficult point, because all of the structural elements have their own role on the viral replication and the viral infectious diseases. And this is the another illustration about the bacteriophage. But what is the bacteriophage? I think that this word is common of some our students, because you know bacteriophage is a type of virus, and we need bacteriophage for the treatment, especially for the bacterial infectious diseases. Because bacterial infectious diseases treated bacteriophage by the help of bacteriophage, and bacteriophage structure is the same of the viral structure because, as I mentioned before, bacteriophage is a type of the virus. And some structural elements of the bacteriophage. The first one, DNA. Please pay special attention to this illustration. DNA are located by one by, like then, and DNA carry genetic information from this generation to another generation on bacteriophage, like other viral elements. And this is the head. And this is the internal proteins. Viral structure both have the internal proteins and the external proteins. And protein, as I mentioned before, the source element of the energy. In addition to it, protein try to protect genome to transmit to another generation. And this is the neck, and this is the tail shed, end plate, pins. By the help of the pins, a virus try enter the host cell organism, and tail fibers. And this illustration show the external structure of virus under microscope. As I mentioned before, in order to some etiological agent of infectious diseases, we need microscopes, and we need electron microscopes in order to observe virus, only electron microscopes. And next one, this is the structure of the rabies virus. Rabies is one of the most dangerous viral infectious diseases around the world. Unfortunately, virus is the most dangerous infectious diseases, and this is the structure of the rabies virus. Rabies virus structure is a little bit different in comparison with the another pathogens of the viral infectious diseases. For example, the involved membrane. The main function of the involved membrane is to protect the rabies virus from the some influences of some external factors. And this is the matrix protein, this is the glycoprotein and ribonucleoprotein. This is the main structural elements of the rabies virus, and you know, rabies virus is a type of virus. That's why the structural element is the same another virus. And viral survival, it's a very important issue, especially on these days. I'd like to say a few words. Viral survival. What is the viral survival? Every microorganism has their own survival mechanism. By the help of such kind of survival mechanism, microorganisms try to survive on the environment, because there are lots of both internal and external factors influence on the viral survival. That's why a virus try to survive on the environment. But how? By the help of their own survival mechanism. For example, the survival mechanism in bacteria can be endospore. For example, spore. This is the survival mechanism of the bacterial structure. And by the help of such kind of survival mechanism, bacteria try to survive on the environment, because the majority of external factors try to kill the virus, the bacteria, and another microorganisms. At the same time, viruses have their own survival mechanism, and I can say that the viral survival is more sophisticated in comparison with bacterial survival mechanism. That's why sometimes it's impossible to treat, to kill the etiological agent of viral infectious diseases. This is the main point of this. And viral survival, for example, this is coronavirus. Unfortunately, we very often hear this word coronavirus, and coronavirus can survive on metal, glass and plastic for as long as 9 days. Unfortunately, it is very long time, and this is a very enough period to the viral replication, unfortunately. And another important point, some can even hang around for 28 days in low temperature. I'd like to emphasize this important point, in low temperatures. As I mentioned before, there are lots of environmental factors influence on the virus. The first one, the temperature. And temperature sometimes try to kill some microorganisms, sometimes don't inactivate them. For example, a virus like the low temperature. Virus always prefer the low or lowest temperature because such kind of temperature don't inactivate a virus. That's why a virus need the viral replication to reproduce another viruses need the low temperature. That's why low temperature is the most appropriate temperature for the viral survival in addition to the viral replication. That's why it is possible to observe viral infectious diseases throughout winter time. For example, in December, in February, for example, in March, because throughout this day the temperature is the low temperature or lowest temperature, and this is the appropriate environment for the virus, and virus can be survival in the low or lowest temperature. This is a very good temperature for virus. And there are lots of another both internal and external factors influence on the viral survival. For example, this is the structure of the coronavirus under microscope. And another important point, for example, temperature influence on the viral survival. In addition to it, the another environmental factors, for example, time, humidity, for example, some disinfectants try to kill the virus. And on this stage of my speech, I'd like to say about the disinfectants, especially alcohol, because I consider and I observe that there are lots of people who don't have enough information about the alcohol, especially the alcohol percent. For example, there are 90% alcohol, 95% and 96% alcohol, and 70% alcohol. I observe that there are lots of people who try to obtain 95 or 96% alcohol for the disinfectant, but this is not true. This is wrong. Please try to obtain 70% alcohol, because 70% alcohol is the disinfectant. 70% alcohol will kill the, for example, coronavirus or the etiological agent of viral infectious diseases. But 90% or 95, 96% alcohol is not disinfectant. Such kind of alcohols are used for the chemical fixation at the wet lab. Please try to obtain 70% alcohol. And next slide. As I mentioned before, there are lots of external and internal factors, environmental factors, try to kill the virus. For example, Ebola virus survival in the environment. Let's suppose that our environment is the blood, drying blood, serum, and etc. And the survival time, it's very important time. For example, let's suppose that our environment is the blood. If our environment is the blood, the survival time of the Ebola virus is up to 14 days, and the temperature is the another main point, influence the viral survival, 21 or 27 temperature, and humidity, for example, it's very important issue, influence on the virus, and I can say that sometimes it's impossible to protect ourselves, our loved ones, for example, our parents, our neighbors, our kids, our pets, even if sometimes it's impossible to protect them from the influence of the virus. And during this time, we try to obtain, for example, some disinfectants, some another protective measures against such kind of infectious diseases. And this is the another slide on the our topic, and this is about the viral transmission. Sometimes I can say that it's impossible to protect ourselves viral transmission, because you know, we live in a modern world. Everybody try to travel another countries to discover another culture, to discover some historical places of some countries. Everybody try to travel. And for example, sometimes some young people prefer to study abroad, and this is the main reason of the viral transmission. And this is very important 3 points: humans, animals, and the environment. I can say that all of them are very connected with each other. For example, animals are connected with the human. Humans are connected with the animals. Environment are connected with animals. And environment with the connected both animals and the humans, and all of them are very connected, and all of them try to influence on each other. This is very important. For example, human, animals, and unfortunately some infectious diseases started to spread around the world, for example viral transmission. And our next slide, epidemics, pandemics. I can say that we very often these words throughout these days, epidemics, pandemics, and there are lots of people who don't have enough information, the true meaning of these words. But what is the epidemic? What is the pandemic? For example, throughout these days, we very often coronavirus pandemic, especially mass media, television, radio, or newspapers always say that coronavirus pandemic. But what is the true meaning of this word? For example, what is the epidemic? Epidemic means some certain disease started to spread in certain area. But what is the certain area? In the certain places. For example, in certain cities. For example, in some cities of Azerbaijan, in Baku, in Gence, in Lənkəran, for example. For example, in some countries, in Ukraine, in Azerbaijan, for example, but certain places, in some village, for example. This is the epidemic. So some infectious diseases, for example, viral infectious diseases, started to spread in certain areas. This is the epidemic, the true meaning of this word. But what is the pandemic? What is the pandemic? Pandemic means some infectious diseases, for example, viral infectious diseases, started to spread around the world. So in every corner of the world, unfortunately. For example, today we can say coronavirus pandemic, because there are the majority of people, unfortunately, around the world suffer from coronavirus. Pandemic means some certain infectious diseases, for example, started to spread around the world. And this is the another differences between the infectious diseases and non-infectious diseases, because non-infectious diseases can't spread around the world like infectious diseases. You know, coronavirus is COVID-19. This is the viral infectious diseases, and the etiological agent of the coronavirus is the virus. This is the true meaning of this words, epidemic and pandemic. And next one, the immune system. And this is very important point, especially these days. What is the immune system, and what is the main function of immune system? And our immune system play a vital role on the viral immunity on our body. And our immune system consists of some immune organs. Our immune system has some immune organs, and by the help of this immune system, our body tries to survive and try to protect itself from the another, for example, pathogens from the bacteria, virus, rickettsia, actinomyces, microscopic fungi, and etc. For example, throughout these days, there are lots of people who try to protect herself, for example, their loved one, their parents, neighbor, pets, their children from the coronavirus. And by the help of the immune system, our body try to survive. But what is the immune system, and what kind of organs are considered immune organs? And this is the true explanation of the animal immune system. An animal's collective defense against pathogens. When I say pathogens, I mean bacteria, virus, rickettsia, actinomyces, such kind of microorganisms. So I mean some etiological agent of the infectious diseases is known as the immune system. So immune system is our defense system, try to protect our body by the help of some cells of the immune system and some organs organs of the immune system. And I really like these words. Animals must not only protect themselves from predators, but also pathogens. And I can say that pathogens are more dangerous in comparison with some wild animals, even if. And this is the main differences of some animals' immune system. For example, all animals have their own innate immunity, but vertebrates also have their accurate immunity. And accurate immunity is more sophisticated immunity in comparison with innate immunity. And this illustration shows some pathogens, some bacteria try to penetrate our body, for example, the animal body, and of course the animal body try to protect itself by the help of the cells of some immune system and some immune organs. And for example, this is the main differences between avian immune system and mammal immune system. You know, there are lots of differences between them. For example, this one, bursa of Fabricius. Bursa of Fabricius is the main immune organ of the avian immune system, and there is no such kind of immune organ on another animals. For example, on mammal, on wild animals or another animals. Bursa of Fabricius is a type of immune organ of the avian immune system, and this play a vital role to protect the avian body. And thymus, I consider that lots of people, especially our students, have enough information about the thymus from their school years on the biology course, and lymph nodes and etc. All of them try to protect our body, and I consider that both animals and humans are really grateful to the immune organs throughout their lives. And the mammal immune system and immune response, as I mentioned before, immune response is a type of the response when some pathogens, some microorganisms penetrated the animal body. Animal body try to prepare the immune response to this pathogen in a span of time. And this is, for example, T and B cells. T and B cells is our fighters and the fighter of the animal body. And antibodies, IgM, IgA, and IgE, there are lots of types of the antibody. And next one, the immune system of the animal body. For example, this is the antigen. This is the some microorganism, for example, some virus, and this virus penetrated to the animal body. Animal body try to prepare the appropriate immune response against this pathogen. For example, antibody A, antibody B, and antibody C. But what is the antigen and what is the antibody? The main function of the antigen cause some infectious diseases. For example, antigen can be bacteria, virus, prion, and etc. But what is the antibody? When some antigens enter to our body or the body of the animal organism try to produce some antibodies, for example, IgM, IgE, IgA, against this pathogen, antibody E, B, C, and there are lots of type of antibodies, and we should be grateful to these antibodies. And this is the another illustration, and this is the pathogen. They are always ready to infect the animal body, and this is the immune response. Some pathogens try to penetrate our body, and our body try to prepare some immune response, and this is the type of antibody, and antibody try to kill some antigens, for example, some virus, some bacteria, and this is the memory cell, because our immune system have their own memory. For example, we infected some infectious diseases. Next time, our body, the immune system, for example, the animal organism, can remember by the help of the memory cell. All of them are the main elements of the immune system of the animals. And next one, the cells of the immune system. The cells of the immune system is the very important issue. Please pay special attention to this one, red blood cells and white blood cells. Both red blood cells and white blood cells are the cells of the immune system. And when I say white blood cell, I mean B cells, T cells and natural killer cell. The animal body have their own natural killer cell, and by the help of this kind of natural killer cell, the animal body try to protect itself from some pathogens, some antigen, for example, the virus, the bacteria, and etc. So white blood cells is a type of cells of the immune system on the animal organism, and this is the red blood cells. Of course, red blood cells have the main function of the animal body. Both red blood cells and white blood cells, cells of the immune system, they are, divided into some main groups, and lymphoblast and etc. And next one, very important point, how do people get infectious diseases? I'd like to say a few words about epidemiological trait. The first one, agent, infectious agent, and such kind of agent cause infectious diseases. For example, viral infectious diseases, virus cause viral infectious diseases. The host cell organism can be the animal body, the human body, the plant body, or some living cells of the organism. As I mentioned before, it can be fertile egg, it can be cell culture, some organs of the lab animals, and etc. And it's very important issue, the environment. All of them are very connected each other. It is impossible to imagine the epidemiological trait without any of them. Agent, host, and environment. Epidemiological trait consists of these three main elements. But how do people get infectious diseases? The first one, direct and indirect. When direct, for example, touching the utensils of some infected people, for example, coughing, sneezing, this is the direct. And what is the indirect? For example, contaminated objects. For example, to touch some infected people's smartphone, for example, and vectors. When I say vectors, I mean some mosquitoes, for example. This is they consider vectors. And how do we control infectious diseases? I consider that this important issue are worry lots of people around the world. And control means the first one, behavior change. What is the behavior change? For example, throughout these days, throughout coronavirus pandemic, we should change our behavior. But how? For example, hand washing. Unfortunately, I know lots of people, they avoid the hand washing. This is not true. This is wrong. Please pay special attention to hand washing every time, especially throughout this time. Next one, vaccines. Vaccines is used against some infectious diseases, for example, and scientists say that vaccine is the highest success of the public health. I totally agree with this idea, because yes, we are grateful to the vaccines, especially virology science. And medication. What is the medication? For example, antimicrobial, for example, treatment, prevention. And this means some treatment, for example, antibiotics, some interferon, anaferon. By the help of them, we try to treat some infectious diseases. For example, by the help of the antibiotic, we try to treat some viral infectious diseases, but some antibiotics don't influence on the virus. We can treat the viral infectious diseases by the help of interferon or anaferon, and there are lots of type of interferon, for example, alpha, beta, gamma, and etc. And the main function of the medication is to protect the public from some infectious diseases, and of course prevention measures against infectious diseases diseases, for example, the vaccination, as I mentioned before. And surveillance. What is surveillance? For example, monitor disease control program. What is this? For example, there are lots of people who don't have enough information, the diseases. They don't have enough information what is the disease, what types of disease are there around the world. For example, some math teacher, some lawyer, some literature teacher, they don't have enough information about the infectious diseases. That's why it's a very important point to give true, appropriate information to the public by the help of, for example, mass media, by the help of television, radio, and I consider that especially throughout these days, social media play a very important role. For example, World Health Organization has their own official Instagram page on the Instagram. It's a very important point to obtain true information from this official page. For example, I consider that this is a very important issue because people don't have any information about the infectious disease or non-infectious disease.
Yes,
and, yeah, okay, okay, Najafova Suada, yes.
How long does COVID-19 can stay in the air?
I don't understand your pronunciation.
COVID-19 havada nə qədər?
Okay, okay. It is a very interesting question, Suada. Thank you for your question. Suada, as I mentioned before, it depends on the temperature. As I mentioned before, like another viruses, coronavirus really like low or lowest temperature. That's why it's a very important point, the temperature. For example, scientists claim that above the 25 or 26 temperature, coronavirus can be survived, unfortunately. For example, 14 days or 18 days, this is the average number. Okay? Okay. Yes, yes, it is possible. Because, you know, virus is everywhere. They are in soil, in air, and that's why it is possible they to penetrate our clothes, unfortunately. That's why it's very important, so by the help of some disinfectant, to disinfect our clothes. Another question? Okay. And this is next one, the environment. For example, vector control, safe water. You know, there are lots of people around the world. They don't have any access to safe water, unfortunately. And sanitation, of course, and hygiene. And infectious control, for example, sterilization. The first one, PPE. What is the PPE? PPE is the personal protective equipment and isolation. For example, throughout these days, we live in a state of social isolation, and I know there are lots of people, they claim this situation, but there is no need any comment, because we should be stay at our home, because our home is the safe place for us. And other One Health and animals and environment, as I mentioned before, they are very connected with each other. And next one, PPE, personal protective equipments or personal protective devices. But what is the personal protective equipments or personal protective devices? This is some types of the personal protective equipments. For example, some gloves, some boots, gloves, or for example, some face mask. By the help of such kind of personal protective equipments, we try to protect our body, try to maintain our health and our hygiene. That's why it's very important to use such kind of personal protective equipments, especially for the infected people. And next one, how to avoid environmental viruses. My dear students, please pay special attention to this issue. The first one, avoid touching your face. Try to avoid touch your face throughout these days. Avoid eye itching. Next one, no shaking hands and no hugs or kisses. I know you really want to shake your some loved ones' hands or to hug them. I see you, but try to avoid shake anybody's hands or hug other people throughout these days, because it can be very dangerous for your health. And don't share your utensils. For example, there are lots of people who should go to some workplaces every single day, and these people can be share their utensils at the workplace, but please try to avoid your utensils throughout these days, because we don't have enough information about who suffer from coronavirus throughout these days, or not coronavirus, and other viral infectious diseases. And please avoid going to restaurants, some shopping malls, all public places. That's why our government officials made a decision to close some restaurants, shopping malls, all public areas. Please try not to go in crowded areas, because it will be very dangerous for your health. Try to maintain your health and your hygiene. Another important point, prefer touch-free card payment, avoid cash, it's very important, and wear gloves when entering some pin. And don't take street shoes into house. It's very important point, because there are lots of people who try to take street shoes into their house. It's wrong. Please try to avoid take street shoes into your house. And limiting visit from relatives or hospitals to a minimum. Next one, keep warm, avoid a cold nose. As I mentioned before, virus prefer a low temperature or lowest temperature. That's why it's very important. Avoid a warm close nose. And good nutrition, fruit, vegetables, and avoid sugar these days, because we need a strong immune system throughout these days. Everybody who unfortunately have the weak immune system under risk, regardless of their age. For example, lots of people claim that young people will never suffer from coronavirus. This is not true information. Everything depends on the immunity, everything depends on the immune system, both on animals and humans. And vitamin D, you know, there are lots of animals and lots of people who suffer from lack of the vitamin D. It's very important to have enough vitamin D in winter time, especially in February, in January, in December. And disinfect your smartphones, because I consider that our smartphones is the dirtiest things. And another work areas, please to follow some guidelines from the World Health Organization.
Yes.
And okay. 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 Okay, okay. Thank you, Leman. Thank you for your question. What is the virus? Virus is the, vaccine. Vaccine is the protective measures against some viral infectious diseases. But how some scientists obtain some vaccine? And vaccine contain some etiological agent. For example, vaccine contains some bacteria against bacterial infectious diseases. For example, vaccine contains some virus against viral infectious diseases. I hope that some days our scientists obtain some vaccines against coronavirus, and this time this coronavirus vaccine will contain the COVID-19. Okay.
Can viruses stay on food?
Okay, of course it is possible. As I mentioned before, a virus everywhere, and we can infect it by the help of some foods. That's why food safety or food security, it's very important point. Okay, and how we maintain our hygiene. For example, the first one, we should wear a face mask, and I can see that face mask is the infected people. There is no need to wear face mask for the healthy people. But for the infected people, it's very important to wear a face mask. Please not to avoid to wear a face mask for the infected people. And next one, cover your sneeze or cough with a tissue. It's very important. And in this photo, this woman sneeze or cough, and by the help of some tissue, he tried cover her sneeze or cough, and just in case, this woman tried to keep some distance, not to be infected person. And next one. It's very important to maintain our hygiene and our health, and I consider that everything is depend us, and everything depends on our behavior, our attitudes. As I mentioned before, we should change our behavior. For example, avoid contact with sick people. I can say that please try not to use public transport, for example, bus, subway, throughout this day. It can be very dangerous for your health and the health of your loved ones. For example, this woman wear a face mask, for example, on subway, and try to keep some distance with other people, because this woman have not enough information about the health of these people. And this one, wash your hands often. Try to wash your hands with liquid soap or the soap thoroughly several times a day, and I can say that soap or liquid soap is a type of disinfectant. That's why it's very important to use soap throughout these days and wash your hands often and thoroughly. Okay. Okay. Okay, Elvin, as I mentioned before, the first one is the good nutrition. Please try to eat some vegetables, some fruits, and avoid sugar these days. And it's very important to have enough dose of vitamin D throughout. And during this time, you can have a strong immune system. And I wish you a strong immune system throughout these days and throughout your life. Okay, Aydan, it is possible. Scientists claim that some wild animals and some another animals can be infected coronavirus, and unfortunately, such kind of animals can be infected other people, and it's possible. Of course, because you know some zoonose diseases and anthropozoonose diseases, we can infect some animals at the same time. Animals can infect us. Okay, and next one, effect of interferon on a viral infection. As I mentioned before, there are lots of treatment methods against some infectious diseases, and I consider that this treatment method is very important for the treatment of the viral infectious diseases. For example, it's very important to use interferon or anaferon throughout these days. But what is the main function of interferon or anaferon, and why we should use such kind of drugs, interferon or anaferon? The main function of the anaferon is to stop, to cancel the viral replication. That's why using interferon is very important, and I can say that interferon or anaferon is the most appropriate treatment against the viral infectious diseases. At the same time, on recent days, I think that everybody should have some drugs like interferon and anaferon to protect their health, to maintain their health and the health of their loved ones, their parents, their kids, and etc. It's very important, and there are some types of interferon, for example, alpha, beta, gamma, and all of the types have the interferon types, and virus is the obligate parasite. That's why it's more difficult to fight against the virus in comparison with bacteria. Sometimes it is easy to treat some bacterial infectious diseases. Virus. Virus is the obligate parasites. That's why sometimes it's impossible to treat viral infectious diseases. That's why I consider that interferon is the unique method to treat our body and to stop viral replication, because as I mentioned before, everything depends on the viral replication, and if virus started to reproduce, unfortunately there are lots of things for them. That's why try to maintain your hygiene, to follow some guidelines, and using such kind of appropriate drugs throughout these days. And I consider that there is no panic, because everything is under control in our country, in Azerbaijan, fortunately. That's why there is no need. Please try just to follow some guidelines to protect your health and to protect your body, your immune system from some pathogens throughout this days, especially the winter time, December, February or January is the some dangerous time for the viral infectious diseases, because as I mentioned before, virus prefer low temperature. But there is no panic, because everything is under control in our country. And I can say that viral infectious diseases, of course, in most cases can be treated by the help of such kind of drugs. And we really should be grateful to some scientists for their contribution of the virology. And virology of some fields, for example, veterinary virology is our field, and on the veterinary virology, scientists try to obtain, for example, some vaccines against viral infectious diseases, and vaccine contain some etiological agent of the infectious diseases. For example, I give some information about the bacteriophage. Bacteriophage is a type virus, but we use some good virus for the treatment of some, for example, bacterial infectious diseases. And I hope that on these days the scientists, the virology scientists, obtained some vaccination about the coronavirus, about the COVID-19, and you know, the majority of people suffer from this disease. But it's very important to follow some guidelines and wear a face mask, avoid to public places, especially crowded places, and try not to use public transport, bus, subway. Try to use your own personal car, or try to go somewhere on foot. I think that it's a very good idea to go somewhere on foot. And please don't forget, virus is everywhere, in air, in soil, inside our body, inside the animal body, inside the plant body. That's why it's very difficult to fight against such kind of infectious diseases, and sometimes it's more difficult to fight against viral infectious diseases. Try to protect your hygiene, try to protect your health, maintain your hygiene. And this is the end of my speech. I wish all of our listeners, especially my students, a strong health throughout these days. Thank you. Is there any question? Okay, thank you.